Hi everyone, Nathan Stein at Pegasus Robotics. Now today's a really nice day. We're going to go ahead and apply some product to a pasture. It's got early annual weeds here that we want to get rid of with a herbicide. But before we go ahead and apply any products on some type of a field like this, we really ought to go ahead and make sure we draw the maps properly and create a plan for application so that we don't have any accidents with our drones and that we're applying products in the right area. That means we actually have to define where the field boundary is, where the obstacles are, and where the no spray zones are in the field so that we're putting the product in the right areas and we're not putting our vehicle in harm's way, or we're not applying product where it's not supposed to go. In order to do that, I'm going to walk you through several different steps that we use in the XAG One app and how you can go about mapping your field for the most accurate application. Okay, so to get started, let's cover some of the equipment we might use when mapping a field. In front of me here, I have the P100 Pro. This is the spray drone that we're going to use for this field, but it's also something you can use for mapping. I have the XRTK mobile base station right here. We would use this if we didn't have internet or we're in a very rural area that maybe doesn't have a CORS network. I have the ARC3 Pro remote right here. This has an RTK antenna in it and can be used to map the field boundaries along with the Android device attached to it here with the XAG One app in it. And yet another tool that people may use to map their fields is the XAG RealTerra module. This has a 20 megapixel camera in it. This is one for a V40. It just snaps in behind the battery box, but you can use it to go fly your fields, and then it will create a map in real time and send it to the app, and then you can draw your boundaries on the app. Last but not least, consumer grade products or professional grade products like this DJI Mavic 3 multispectral is a great tool to be used in the field. It can use either the multispectral cameras or the RGB, and you want to make sure you have the RTK antenna in it so that you can fly the field with accuracy and map those photos so that you can create RTK boundaries. Using Pix4D fields. We would process that either on our desktop in the field, in the office. You could do it before or waiting or before you go out and actually do the application. But that's a tool that you can use as well in this process. So now we're going to go ahead and walk through each mode and using some of these tools in the field. Now to create a new field, I'm going to click plus, and I can click new field or multi-field, which is several fields in one. I'm going to click the new one. And I just want to spray this area right here is what we're going to go ahead and go after. And I'm going to use a satellite imagery to show you what this looks like to start with. And remember that satellite imagery can be off as much as 3 meters in any direction. So when you're mapping, you want to kind of be sure that you map very, very conservatively. And this means that you're not going to probably apply product in every corner. And that's going to have to be something you're going to be okay with if you're going to do this method. Otherwise, I would suggest using the RTK method and also using an actual map when you do it. This could be out of date. This satellite image is probably 2 years, 3 years old. So keep that also in mind as we're looking at the trees, which may be much larger than they are in reality. In order to create a point, you make sure to you can use your finger, you can use the drone, or you can use the remote controller. I'm going to use my finger in this example, and I'm doing a field boundary. I'm going to go ahead and start clicking as I go around the field, and we're going to go ahead and draw this boundary. Click auto close to close, and there's your boundary. Now if we want to put in a obstacle, we click this area in the obstacles, and we can outline obstacles. Now up here on top of this hill is a pallet. Believe it or not, that's been there for more than 2 years, so this is still very accurate. I'm not going to go in that area. And there's some trees over here. I kind of want to keep an eye out for. I'm hoping that I'm close enough. And then you can do no spray zones if you want to do. This just means the nozzles, it'll actually fly over these areas, but it won't apply. So we're just going to do this little ravine here for an example to show what that looks like. Okay. Now you just save your map, and you can see this is a very coarse map, but I have drawn it, and I'm going to name this hand drawn so we can compare it later, and you can see what my map looks like. Now we're going to go ahead and use a different method. Okay, you can see my position here on the screen again. We're going to go ahead and use the ARC3 Pro remote to draw the boundaries now in this example. And so in order to do this, I'm going to have to connect it to an RTK to get RTK position. In order to do that, I'm going to go to Me. I'm going to click on the device, and I'm going to click on my remote. Underneath there's an RTK reference or positioning mode. I can choose here, this is where you would choose GPS, VRTK, or RTK. I'm going to choose RTK, and you can see that I've already gone through and selected cores, and I have my positioning there. Now, one thing that people need to know is that in order to do this and make it work, you also need to turn the remote on to mapping mode. That requires long press of the function button. You'll hear a couple beeps. This enables it to get its corrections now, and it will automatically give us our position of the remote. Now, in order to start, we're going to go ahead like we did before, and we're going to hit the plus button, the new field, and instead of using our finger to draw, we're going to use the remote to draw. It's going to give you a selection between what remotes are here and what you can do. We're going to go ahead and use the ARC3 Pro. Click Use. It's going to give you a warning about holding it straight up and down and making sure that it has a clear view of the sky. This enables you so that you get an accurate position and you're not skewing your position when you're walking across the field. That's going to outline here that I am not in RTK active mode. I'm going to go ahead and move to an area where I can get better reception away from this tree. Okay, so in order to create a point, you're going to go ahead and use the L1 button right there to drop a point like this. So the nice thing about this mode is I can just go ahead and drop and click points all along this boundary. And depending if I'm using the RTK, VRTK, or GPS depends on how close I want to be to this boundary. Because I have RTK on this, I can actually get this pretty close because I'm within a few centimeters of the accuracy tolerances with RTK. If I'm using VRTK though, I may want to get about this far away from my target, about a half a meter or a meter or so. That gives me a little bit more room to work for the drone to be safe. And if I'm using GPS accuracy for this method, I may want to stand much further away from my target just to be sure to give myself enough buffer when I'm spraying. So I'm going along here now on this side of the boundary, and you're going to go ahead and see that I have a large oak tree right here on this edge. Now, some people might think that mapping a field boundary means walking along the edge of that fence line down there. And that would be probably an accurate description of a field boundary. However, if you're going to map that field boundary, if your drone comes in and sprays here at 12 feet, it's going to get into this tree and you're not going to have a very safe situation there. So in order to do that properly, you can either create a obstacle around this tree and then the field boundary that goes along there, or you can simply just map around this tree as if it's a field boundary, and then the drone won't go into this space. So I'm going to go ahead and make my field boundary go around this tree, which actually stops right here. and then I'm going to walk back here and do the same. So here I have my electric fence, and I have a little bit of an edge over here. Now this is just the boundary for cattle, and technically speaking you could fly over this with your spray drone if you set the height right. So it's up to you on whether or not you want to go ahead and go outside this area and spray those areas, or if you would rather just do that hand flying possibly later and manually spray those small patches. But I'm going to play it safe and go ahead and go along this fence line here, and then we can continue moving across the pasture. Okay, so I've got my boundary closed, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a no spray zone. So I'm going to go here, and I can use my RTK here to go ahead and walk around this area. So obstacles are no fun here, so I'm going to go ahead, and as you can see I have a tree branch here. I'm going to go ahead and create an obstacle the same way I did before. Select obstacle, and then now I can go ahead and walk around it using my R3 Pro. So like I said before, these have been here for quite a few years. They show up on the satellite map, but I'm going to go ahead and walk around them and mark them as an obstacle. Okay, so this is one of those things you always forget in the back of the grove, and I chose to use it as an obstacle as well because maybe someday we're going to move it out. You could use the field boundary to come around here, but in this case I'm going to make an obstacle. So in just the way that I used the GPS on my remote to go around the boundaries and draw the field, I can use the drone to do that too with this P100 Pro. I have an FPV camera right here that shows me what I'm seeing in front of the drone, and I have another one underneath that shoots straight down, and it has a target on it. And then with the position of the GPS receivers, I can figure out exactly where that point's at. So we can fly right along these trees at a safe height and then go around the boundaries of this field and mark out our boundaries, our obstacles, and our no spray zones. We're going to go to our screen here. We're going to hit plus. We're going to click new field like we did before, but instead of clicking on the remote or using the hand, we're going to go ahead and use the aircraft. Now we've got this here, it's on RTK and it's ready to go. We click use, and we could go ahead and, didn't quite click that. You can see the screen here that's looking down. I can also hit this R1 button, and you can see in front of the aircraft, and you can switch it back down below. Now we're ready to go ahead and fly our mission. So in order to manually fly, you're going to go ahead and push the control sticks in and then down, and then that'll start the motors, and then you can push up to get taking off. Okay, you can see now the aircraft is flying above me, and we could go ahead and see the aircraft up above flying here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to fly along these trees and map this. Remember, you got to stay above the trees. We can map like we did before by just hitting the button. And you can see the target on your screen. I do want to caution you to be sure that you don't get too close to these trees and pay too much attention to your remote. Make sure that you're high enough so that you're not going to get in danger of your vehicle when you're trying to map those obstacles. Do keep in mind that you may have to return home a few times to get new batteries and recharge batteries so that you can complete the boundary. In the earlier method, we used satellite imagery to then go ahead and use as a base map behind and then tap on the screen where we wanted our boundaries and obstacles to go. We noted though at the time that satellite imagery is not that accurate and it can shift north, south, east, or west, give or take 3 meters in any direction sometimes. So the accuracy of that is not very good. Now, another method we can use is creating a map using the RealTerra module. This RealTerra module then can be used and it just attaches to the bottom. We can unhook our P100 Pro right here by lifting those tabs, disconnecting our hoses in the back, and then set it on top of this base and latch it. This base then has the RealTerra module on it with a camera, 20 megapixel camera facing down. We can plug that into our aircraft and then we're able to go ahead and automatically be able to fly this area, map it, and stitch it on that module. Now that module is going to go ahead and upload that data and put it into our XAG One app in phone. We can use that as a base map, just like a satellite image in the background, and then we can use our finger to go ahead and then touch on the screen where we want our boundaries to go. Okay, now we're going to move the P100 Pro from the liquid base to the RealTerra module. To do so, we're just going to drop our latches here. We're going to disconnect our hoses underneath, okay? We're going to disconnect our electrical cable there. And what we're going to do is we're going to gently rock the aircraft back. Be careful of the propellers. And I want you to connect or to hook these tubes underneath so that they don't get in the way of our mapping camera. We're going to carefully rock forward, walk over here, and set this on top of the base. We can then use our latches, our cable, and then secure that on a plastic clip that's underneath there so that it doesn't get in front of the lens of the camera. Now we're ready to go ahead and set up our mapping mission. Open the app here and you can see on XAG One that it automatically says start aerial survey because it's connected to the base, the RealTerra base. I have RTK, so I'm ready to go. I'm going to click Start Survey, New HD Map. It's going to tell you to fly a little bit past your boundaries. That makes a little bit of sense because we need to have that geolocation accuracy and we want to be able to see past our boundaries. And we're just going to select where we're going to fly. I'm going to fly here, here. I'm going to fly down to here, all the way past the area that I'm planning to fly. And then I can adjust these and auto close. So there's my boundary that I'm going to go ahead and fly around our pasture here, and I'm going to make a map of that. All I have to do is click next. It's going to ask you what the name of it is. You hit OK, and you're ready to go ahead and start mapping. It builds the route already, pre-programs everything, and all we have to do is click start. So the drone just landed and the map says that it's still processing the HD map. It's about 60% and it's been sitting here for just a little bit. But I just leave the power on to the drone while that map is still processing. And eventually that map's going to show up on my screen here so we can go ahead and draw our boundaries. All right, so in here we can see our HD map. I can zoom in and see all the high details that I want. We can use this to inspect, but if we're going to make a new field boundary in here, we just have to click the new field, and it's going to load that map now in our field creation mode. Now we have our boundary selected here, so we're doing a field boundary, and I'm going to use the point and click methods. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to outline our obstacles. Now we want to do our no spray zone. We're going to go ahead and click non-spray. The last thing you have to do is go ahead and save this field. So we're going to go ahead and click save. We're going to give it a name. I'm going to give it a name, RealTerra. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to use a multispectral drone to fly this pasture behind me, make a map in Pix4D fields, create obstacles, boundaries, and no spray zones, and export those to XAG One. All right, so I've already got my map 3 multispectral ready to go to map this field, and I've loaded my mission up on my remote. I just simply created a route. I've gone through and I've named it. I've gone and I said I'm going to put 70% overlap and 80% frontal overlap. I'm flying at 395 feet, and I'm just going to basically fly just the pasture area. There's a field in the middle that I can't avoid, but I'm going to go ahead and map that anyways. I've set the RTK on for the DigiFarm so that we're using the same RTK correction source. So we're ready to go ahead and take off and fly this mission. Drone mission is done. We've got our map data here. We're going to go ahead and put this on Pix4D and process it. So I've taken the card out of my drone, I've put it in my computer, and I've loaded Pix4D fields. Now I've gone in here and I have selected the folder on the drive that contains that pasture map or all the pictures from there. And it's going to go ahead and load those photos, and it's asking me if I need fast or accurate processing. Now in the field, on a flat field, I would use fast processing. It's going to give me good 2D reconstruction and RTK accuracy. However, if I want to have even more accurate results, I use the accurate processing. That's going to give me good 3D data, like topography. It's going to show these hills, the trees, even small little trees will show up in there, and that'll help in my mapping process. But that process does take a little bit longer to process and accurate, so you may just want to go home and take that and process that at your home computer. And that's one reason why a lot of people go ahead and map ahead of schedule before they even start the application season, because they don't want to take the time in the field to do this on a nice day like this. So you can either map ahead and have your maps ready. You can go ahead and map when you're in the field and draw your boundaries, or depending on what level of precision you want, you can choose fast or accurate here when you're in the field.
All right, so our map's now done. You can go ahead and see the whole entire pasture that got done and mapped, not just this small section. And it didn't take very long to process it all. And we can go ahead and start our boundary creation by going to boundaries and obstacles. Click on draw boundary. and we can go ahead and start. Okay, so that's the end of the boundary, so hit check to accept it and save. Now to create obstacles, we can go in here and click obstacle. Okay, now with our obstacles and our boundary done, we can go ahead and add no spray zones by adding another boundary and clicking in here. Alright, now with our no spray zones, our obstacles, and our boundary done, we can go ahead and work to make the export file. We're going to start an operation. We're going to create a targeted operation and continue. We're going to use the obstacle, or the boundary and no spray, as well as the obstacles, and we're going to hit continue. Now we can see our field. We can go ahead and manually draw the operations or use existing annotations as operations. I'm going to go ahead and use existing. We're going to hit continue. We're going to use a prescription unit. Then we're going to use the orthomosaic. We can change the cell size. This doesn't matter so much right now because we're not doing any sort of targeted applications, but you can just set it to something and hit create. And we're going to do one rate across the whole field, so we're going to go ahead and just paint this, and then say we're going to put 2 gallons to the acre, or not 2, but we'll say 8 liters per acre. And we have our obstacles and our boundaries, and then everything's ready to go. We're going to hit export. We go to our operations. We make sure we have orthomosaic, or the name of the operation. We're going to drop down to XAG, and then we're going to export holes and boundary as obstacles or no spray areas. We're going to set it as no spray areas, and then we're going to click export. We're going to select where we want to put that. Open up fms.xaggo.com. We're going to log in with our username and password, and then click login. Once we get here, we can go ahead and go to farmland. We're going to upload, and then we're going to select where we put the file at for pasture, or for this pasture spraying. Once imported, you can see that we have our red spots, which are our obstacles, and the yellow is our no spray, and our boundary as yellow. We're going to go ahead and import to XAG One and click confirm. So as you can see now, in our map, we've been able to bring in our obstacles in the red, our no spray zones in this area right here, and our boundary on the outside edge. And this concludes how to process in Pix4D fields, create the boundaries, obstacles, and no spray zones, and then export it to the XAG One app.
In the previous segments, we've talked about how to fly the field and capture all the boundaries, whether it's through walking, touching on our screen using satellite imagery, whether it's using the remote to walk the boundaries with RTK or VRTK, or even GPS. We talked about the accuracy differences and how to map all these different boundaries. But now that we have a boundary, we're ready to go ahead and execute a spray mission. Behind me here, I have the P100 Pro. I've loaded the tank full of product and water. I've also put in brand new batteries here in the saddle. I've turned on the aircraft to get its RTK position. I've deployed my spray arms and done my pre-flight inspections. So now all we have to do is go ahead and start the XAG One app and start planning our mission. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and select which boundary we're going to use to plan this flight. Of course, we have a lot of different ones on here because we used a lot of different methods. I'm going to go and use the one that I trust the most right now, which is the one when we walked around the field. We've selected that, and now we could go ahead and hit confirm to select that field. And let's review what our flight plan looks like. Okay, so our flight plan has loaded, and we can review and see that we have no spray zones. We have obstacles that we're going around that we've put in here. There's that elevator that I was down there with. You can see how complicated this is to fly around and to avoid all these different spots. The drone is not going to go into places where it cannot get out, so we don't have to worry about those areas, and we can change these settings in our flight pattern, or our path. So I'm going to click on spray settings right now, and I'm going to go ahead and set this to 2 gallons to the acre, which is 7.57 or so in that area. We're going to go ahead and leave our droplet size at about 200. And we're going to go ahead and go back. We're going to set our route settings here. So our route settings are, we're going to fly at 3.3 meters. Let's go to 3.6 meters roughly. And our flight speed, we want to go a little bit slower in the pasture area. So I'm going to say going 9 meters a second is probably fair. That gives us a little bit of time with our obstacle avoidance. If we're flying full speed, that's kind of dangerous. But you know, if you trust your boundaries really well and you think everything's perfect, by all means, you should be able to use the faster flight speeds. But the vehicle will not be as responsive in those circumstances. So do use that with caution. We're going to go ahead, our flight spacing, our route spacing is going to be 8 meters. It's going to choose the most efficient way, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that. You can also set, this is an important setting here, is the boundary safety clearance. This is how close do you want to get to your boundary. And if you don't trust it very much, you can put this up pretty high. If you do trust it a lot, you can get it closer, but I would never set it at probably 0 or 1.5, which is the lowest you can go. So this is getting pretty close to those trees. I don't know if that's a really smart idea. You'll also see that you can get into these tighter spaces that you weren't able to before. We can even get back into this area back here. Again, I don't know if you really want to get super close to that boundary. I would rather stay at least 2.5 meters away from it. Remember, you're spraying probably about 4 meters wide, so you're going to be spraying over the top, so you're going to get some of this on the trees. You may want to get this just a little bit wider than that, so we probably set this realistically at 3 meters. I just want to show you what this looks like on my screen. So now we can review the flight, make sure it looks like it makes sense, double check that we're not getting into a place where we don't want to be. Notice that we're flying over a no spray zone, but it will turn off the application during that time. Notice that the red obstacle, it won't go in or near it. And there's another one down here. Advanced settings, we can go ahead and set boundary mode if we want to, so we can go all the way around this boundary once and then come out. Or we could spray everything in the middle and then spray that boundary last. There's a couple different ways to do that. We can go ahead and say that we're going to use this operational range, and we can click the boundary operation. I can click this, and this will turn on the boundary mode. This enables the boundary to be sprayed at the very end when we're done. You're going to select all, so then it goes around all of them. And when you zoom out, you're going to see what that boundary looks like. One thing to keep in mind here is the approaching route. Now, we are inside the boundary of this field, so there is really no approach route to get started. However, I'm going to go ahead and set our flight height at 10 meters to get in. If we were on the outside of the field and we were flying in, if you're flying over trees or fences, you'd want to set this higher. You'd also change your flight speed to something that's a little bit more cautious, like in the 7 meters per second range, and that's going to bring the vehicle back when you're done. Again, we are flying inside the boundary here. You can see our position is right here, so we are not actually going to be flying outside the boundary and in, so there is no real approaching route. It's just going to fly to the first part and start going. All right, that wraps it up for planning the flight. I've showed you how we can use existing boundaries that we've created using the RTK methods that I showed you in previous sections. We've created that boundary, the obstacles, and the no spray zones. We've selected flight height, flight width, spray rate, the distance from the obstacles for an extra measure of protection, and the distance from the boundary for that extra measure of protection. And now we're ready to go ahead and apply our product. So the only thing left to do is to hit start operation. So in summary, there are a lot of ways that you can use the XAG One app to create field boundaries, field obstacles, and no spray zones. From walking the field edge or driving it with a GPS on your remote, to flying it with a GPS on your spray drone, to just mapping the field itself with a RealTerra module or consumer or commercial grade product and processing it on Pix4D fields. Whatever way you want, you can go ahead and use. Just bear in mind the tolerances and the accuracies of your GPS that you're using and the accuracies of the device that you're using when you're drawing it on the screen or mapping it and walking those boundaries. We want you to be successful in your projects, so please feel free to reach out to the Pegasus Robotics staff. You can reach us online or by phone, and we'd be glad to help you to make your project successful.